So I grew up in a small town, East London, which I'm sure you know in the Eastern Cape. And we were very much influenced by what was happening at that time in the 1970s um, in the country, all the unrest that was going on, and we were in high school. So my younger brother got arrested when I was 21. He was quite active as anti-apartheid activist in his school days. And he went to university, to Rhodes University, and got arrested when he was 20 years old, and I was 21. So that played a huge role. I mean, we were very active in our school. Um, we had a lot of teachers in East London who were very politically awake and active and doing lots of things underground. So they influenced us a lot as school children. So, for example, we never went to school on Republic Day. We always protested against lots of things that were going on in the country. But my brother took it very seriously and got very involved and got arrested. And that was a huge shock. And it really devastated our family. And I then took his job. He was a youth coordinator at the Institute of Race Relations in the youth program. And so when he went into prison, I took his job, and that's really how I got very involved with activism, working with young people, doing very simple things like, helping students to write exams, to get to get tutoring for exams, to do extracurricular activities that was all not available to young Black kids at that time. So that was my introduction to activism, was through my brother's arrest, and then of course joining the Institute of Race Relations youth program and getting very involved, even though I was at that time already married and had 3 children. Then I have 4. At that time, I had 3. So I got married very young. I dropped out of school, much to my family's horror, and but got involved with the youth program. Well, it was very hard not to know how unequal the society was at that time. It wasn't something that you heard about or was told about. We were living it, we were living the inequality, we were living the brutality. So, for example, East London was a small town with, the colored and Indian communities lived together in one area, which was very underserviced and um, uh, you know, um, what is the word, developed. And, we had huge potholes in our streets, which we as children loved because we played Keniki. I don't know if you've ever heard of that game. We played those games in the potholes, and we loved the potholes. But of course, our parents were very upset that the cars got damaged and got stuck in the potholes. So we grew up, with our refuse not being collected in, very unhygienic conditions. And living cramped together in small townships. At that time, we lived together as a community, and we all had to go to the same school, and our school had no facilities. So we lived in very, very unmistakable inequality and oppression. And we were very aware of it. We didn't think, oh, it's just bad luck that we live like this because we can't afford to live anywhere else. We were very aware that we were living this way because the government of South Africa at the time didn't care about us and were not interested in providing us with any better conditions. at some point of time, they decided to separate the communities. So they, of course, a community living together and sharing um, discrimination and oppression also becomes a strong community. I remember going to the Department of Home Affairs to register one of the children that was born. And I remember seeing the benches there saying whites only. There were no benches to sit on. And all the benches were empty, but they had a big sign on them saying whites only. So there was nowhere for me to sit and wait. So those were the things we grew up with. We saw that every day. My father would send me to the bank, and I had to go through a side entrance to bank the money. My father was a shopkeeper. And so there was no mistaking. If I went to the dentist, we couldn't walk into the dentist through the front door. We went through a side door. So that was what was present in our lives from childhood to teenagehood. Later on, I got involved with the union and played quite a big role in that during that time in trying to get better conditions for us as workers for Natal newspapers. But it was a very short period. I then moved to Johannesburg, and then I got involved with people opposing women abuse. So women's rights and violence against women became the theme of the rest of my life. I think all that activism led me to women's rights. And so from that time, since now, from 1993 until today, that's the work I do. I work on gender equality, gender-based violence, feminist approaches to humanitarianism. At the moment, I'm the co-lead of the Feminist Humanitarian Network, and I'm also the Global Protection Advisor for ActionAid.
Wow, thank you so much, Anu. I mean, you were a single mom of 4 children and you dropped out of school. How did you end up going back to school, or did you
I
just?
went back to school when I was 28. My mother actually passed a comment because my son was 12 years old, and my eldest son, and she said, "Oh, one of these days, your children are going to be more educated than you." And it really shocked me and spurred me back to school. So I was 28 years old when I went to night school to write matric. At that time, I was living in Durban. I lived in Durban for 3 years. I took the children to Durban. That was my time when I was in the union working at Natal newspapers. So I went back to school and I passed matric, and I was so thrilled with passing matric at 28 that I promptly registered with UNISA for a BA degree. It took me 6 years to do the BA degree, which I did part-time, 2 subjects a year for 6 years. And in the middle of that, I moved to Johannesburg and I finished the BA degree with a lot of struggle, I have to say. And then I joined People Opposing Women Abuse during that time. And I started training as a lay counselor so that I could counsel women in abusive relationships. And that led me to psychology. So I registered for a psychology degree at RAU, which is now the University of Johannesburg, which is Rand Afrikaans University. So I finished an honors degree in psychology and then did a master's. I then went on to the University of Port Elizabeth, which is now Nelson Mandela University, and I did a master's in conflict management. And all of that studying and working and being a single mother led me um, to start working internationally. I joined the Center for the Study of Violence because I studied conflict. I went to took a job with the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, as the peace building manager. And through that, I started working internationally and got sent to Liberia with UN Women. And yeah, I then decided to do a PhD. So I recently graduated, actually. It took me a long time to do it because I kept putting it off and putting it off. And finally, when I turned 60, I graduated with the PhD.